What's going on, YouTube? Welcome to the Yu-Gi-Oh journey. I wanted to start off this channel by creating a series where I can actually teach people how to play Yu-Gi-Oh from scratch. Meaning like if you have no experience at all with Yu-Gi-Oh, and then also move on to like more advanced concepts to where even people who have played Yu-Gi-Oh for a while but never actually took the time to learn a lot of like the deeper concepts like the damage step and event chaining and things like that can actually learn as well. So the beginning's gonna be pretty simple things, dealing with like monsters, spells, traps, just kind of getting the bearings on Yu-Gi-Oh and kind of taking you from being not knowing anything about Yu-Gi-Oh to um, being able to basically like play a game and kind of get you higher and higher until you can actually like go to tournaments and feel pretty confident about how to play and things like that. Because I know it can be a huge thing to tackle starting off. And so I decided to call the series Yu-Gi-Oh from scratch just for that reason. And the first video is going to be, I already filmed it, it's going to be a little bit monotone because there's a lot to cover with monsters and things, and so bear with me on that, but I plan to just kind of keep it going. And if you have anybody who's also been wanting to learn Yu-Gi-Oh, or maybe you know how to play Yu-Gi-Oh and they want to learn how to play Yu-Gi-Oh, this would be the perfect environment for them, just kind of learning from scratch. And if you guys have any recommendations, feel free to add them in the comments. I'm more than willing to adjust things and add things to how people like them. But yeah, I mean, other than that, let's just get started with it. This first episode is going to be about monsters and monster effects, so let's just jump on into it.
Alright, so if you're going to start a new card game, the first thing you'd want to do would be to find out the rules. So if you just type in Yu-Gi-Oh rulebook, you should be able to find right at the top the official rulebook for Yu-Gi-Oh. That's what we're going to be using to start, because it's pretty simple to just go off of the rulebook, and it's really easy for me to kind of go over a lot of the material because Yu-Gi-Oh has a lot to learn. So we'll start off with this one. These are all the basics of stuff you're going to need. You're going to have to create a deck, of course, with Yu-Gi-Oh. You can get packs from booster packs, things like that. But in terms of what you actually need to duel, so first off, you're going to need a deck. A deck can contain anywhere from 40 to 60 cards, but it must be at least 40. And you can only use 3 copies of the same card in your deck, and that also includes the extra deck and the side deck. That is important because there are other card games that you can have 4 of each card. Like I think Pokemon you can have 4, Magic you can have 4, etc. But Yu-Gi-Oh you can only have 3 of each card. There's also a forbidden, limited, and semi-limited list. What that means is forbidden is you cannot have that card in your deck or any of your decks. Limited means you can only have 1 copy, and semi-limited means you can have 2. And we'll go over that in a different video. But basically, you want to keep your deck as close to the 40 card minimum as possible, because if you have a deck with more cards, it's going to be less consistent and you're going to be less likely to draw the cards that you need. And then there's the extra deck. The extra deck is a whole other thing in and of itself, basically. It contains all kinds of other monsters called XYZ monsters, which is the XYZ monsters. They're just called XYZs. Synchro monsters, fusion monsters, and then also pendulum monsters go in there too. But we'll go over all the different types of monsters in the next video, because there's a lot to unpack there. Basically, you can have up to 15 cards in the extra deck. So these types of monsters that I just mentioned, also link monsters, do not go in the main deck. It's super important. You bring those out from the extra deck using monsters from the main deck. The extra deck can only consist of the monsters that I mentioned previously in any combination, and they are not counted towards a 40 card minimum in the main deck. Then there's a side deck. You're mostly going to be using this if you actually plan on going into competitive gameplay, like tournaments and things like that. So the side deck is it's a separate deck of 15 cards. Usually you build it to help you prepare for other matchups that your deck might not be good against. Basically how this works is Yu-Gi-Oh is played in matches, so in games of 3. And let's say you're playing against a deck that has a really not unfair advantage, but an advantage over your deck. And you can basically have cards in your side deck that you can swap out with the main deck to help give you a better advantage. We'll go over that in a different video as well. But basically, if you do end up using your side deck, you have to swap the same amount of cards as you did from your main deck. So if you put 5 cards from your side deck into your main deck, you have to take 5 cards out of your main deck out. Other important things are calculators, and 100% definitely need card sleeves. Otherwise your cards will get absolutely destroyed. And then there's the game mat. The game mat is kind of a lot to go over here as well, but we'll kind of hit the main points. Number one is the main monster zone. This is where we're going to be putting all of your monsters. And you can have up to 5 monsters in the main monster zone. Number 2 is the spell and trap card zone. This is where you put all of your spells and trap cards. Also pendulum monsters if you're going to end up playing pendulum cards. And 3 is going to be the graveyard. This is where all the cards go after they've been used, after they've been destroyed, things like that. 4 is the main deck zone. That's where you put your deck. 5 is the field zone. So there are things called field spells, and that's going to be where you put those. 6 is the extra deck. That's the one that we mentioned earlier right here. The extra deck, that's where that goes. And then 7 is going to be the extra monster zone. This is, you can put the other monsters from the extra deck there. Typically you want to put link monsters in here, but you can put anything in there from fusion to XZ, synchro, whatever. And this is kind of where we're going to get into the kind of meat and potatoes of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is going to be the monster cards. So this is how a monster card looks like, and there's all kinds of different monster cards. They're going to have a card name, which you can see right here, a level, an attribute, and then the type of the monster. The card number is just like what like pack or something it came out of, and each monster has attack and defense points, and then a card description. A lot of these are pretty self-explanatory. The ones that might be kind of confusing are like the level, and we'll kind of go over what that signifies in a bit. The attribute is just like different. There's different right here. This shows you the different types of attributes. There's dark, light, earth, water, fire, and wind. They're not super important at the moment, but they can be depending on what kind of decks you play. The type, so monster are divided into separate types. There's all kinds of different ones. And then if they have like any kind of like additional important information, they'll tell you here on the side. Like this one is like an effect monster, which is important. Okay, so what is a monster card? There are 2 basic types of monsters that we'll go over at the moment. One is normal monsters. These are monsters that have no effects. And then there's effect monsters, which, shocker, have effects. So normal monsters, they're monsters that, like I said, they don't have any kind of effect or anything like that. They're there to basically just summon and use for attacks, things like that. They have other things that you can use them for as well, but effect monsters are probably going to be seeing most when you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And they have different types of effects. The first one is a continuous effect, and there's ignition effect, quick effect, and trigger effect. So they're all going to be different depending on what kind of monster it is and things like that. We can actually use like one card in particular to kind of go over a lot of these examples. That card would be Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, because it has pretty much all of these types of effects. So we'll go over them really quickly. Continuous effect is an effect that happens as soon as the monster is summoned successfully, and it lasts until either the effect says it's gone or the monster is no longer face up. So an example of this would be monsters with 2,000 or less attack cannot declare an attack. That would be a continuous effect. There's also one on Red Eyes Dark Dragoon that says this card cannot be targeted by other cards, and it cannot be destroyed by card effects. That would be a continuous effect. So as long as that card is on the field and face up, it has that effect. Other effects would be ignition effects. So these are effects that you can use just by declaring its activation during your main phase. And there are some ignition effects that are going to have costs. One effect that we can use as an example would be the one on Red Eyes Dark Dragoon. And that one allows you to send a monster to the graveyard and inflict damage to your opponent based on the attack of that monster. So that's an ignition effect. That's an effect you'd say, I'm activating the effect of Red Eyes Dark Dragoon to send this monster, etc. A trigger effect is an effect that happens at specific times. These would be like, for example, like when this monster is destroyed, when this card is sent to the graveyard, when a monster of X type is special summoned, something like that. A good example of this would be when this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, target one card on the field, destroy that target. So the trigger effect would be when this card is sent to the graveyard, when it's destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, then you can basically destroy a card on the field. A quick effect would be a effect that you can even activate on your opponent's turns. So these type of effects have a spell speed of 2, which might not be super clear on what that means right now, but we'll go over that as well. So you can actually activate these typically whenever, unless there is some type of needed activation. So like for example on Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, it says when an effect is activated, you can negate that. You can discard one card and negate that effect. That would be an example of a quick effect. Pretty much all quick effects are going to say quick effect next to the I guess activation requirement, or if you can just activate it just whenever, it'll just say quick effect. Flip effects are interesting. So when a monster is face down and gets flipped face up, that is when the flip effect is triggered. So this can happen either when you flip summon it or when it's attacked. It will say flip on the card, and then you can activate that effect. So for example, there are cards that have, like for example, flip effect, draw one card. So the other one we're going to want to look at is the beginner's guide as well. There's just a couple things in here that are pretty useful about monsters, since we are talking about them. So basically how to play your monsters, right? So when at the start of your turn, you have one normal summon or set. So if you have a hand like this, like they're mentioning, you can normal summon a monster on the field in face-up attack position, like how they're showing right here. So this upright position right here is attack position. Only attack position monsters can attack, which is important. And then when you set, you put the monster face down and then sideways, just like that, in defense position. So defense position monsters will protect your life points from attacks. There are certain effects that will allow you to basically pierce over defense points, but that's not important right now. And so when you set a monster, this is like how you would play like a flip monster, right? Because a flip monster wants to be flipped face up. So when you set a monster, you're basically setting it up for its flip effect to activate. Another way you can summon monsters is tribute summoning or tribute setting. So the level that I mentioned earlier is significant here. So monsters that have a level of 1 through 4 can be normal summoned or set without a tribute. Monsters that have 5 or 6 stars for their level need 1 tribute summon, and a monster that has 7 or more stars needs 2 tributes, unless it says it needs 3 or whatever. So when you tribute a monster, you take the monster that you're tributing off the field, and then you summon the monster. So you can either do like a tribute summon or a tribute set. You can tribute set a monster and face down defense position as well. One thing to note is that monsters can never be in face down attack position. And then last but not least, there are also special summons. So special summons are important to Yu-Gi-Oh! It's pretty much how Yu-Gi-Oh! Has these like crazy combos that you might have heard about, and why it's kind of unregulated in the sense where, like, I know that Magic has mana, Pokemon has like energy, which kind of you need to like use as somewhat of like a cost to activate cards or to do certain things, do certain attacks, etc. Yu-Gi-Oh! Doesn't have that, so we just have special summoning. The reason why it's so broken is that there is no limit to the amount of monsters you can special summon in a turn. So there are certain decks that can special summon like 8 monsters in a turn, no problem. And those are usually typically like the higher tier decks. But even if you special summon a monster, you still get your 1 normal summoner set per turn. So special summons are a bonus. Like I said, that's what makes Yu-Gi-Oh! Kind of really powerful and what makes certain cards really broken. And then if the card's effect does not tell you which battle position to special summon it in, you can choose either face-up attack or face-up defense position, or unless it states otherwise. So whenever you special summon a monster, so like there's a card called Monster Reborn, which will bring a monster back from the graveyard, you can either put it in face-up attack or face-up defense position. And then when you special summon a monster, you can ignore the tribute summon rules that we just talked about. You could just basically follow the instruction on the card that is allowing you to special summon, which is another really important thing about special summoning as well, is that it kind of ignores a lot of like the main mechanics of Yu-Gi-Oh! And a lot of decks are really built around only having 1 normal summon, which is why certain cards, like if anybody remembers the card Ultimate Offering, is totally busted. RIP, that card will never come back. That's the reason what makes special summoning so powerful, is that you can ignore a lot of mechanics that otherwise would be restricting. But that's pretty much it for monsters for now. We are going to go over all the different types of monsters, like Synchro, XZs, Link monsters, all the extra deck monsters, things like that. How turns work. The next video I'm going to put up is probably going to be about spells and traps, because those are another key part of Yu-Gi-Oh! As well. But yeah, if you liked my descriptions. If you like the video, feel free to subscribe, like, etc. Comment. Let me know if you guys want me to focus on anything next in particular. I do also plan on focusing like the more advanced mechanics of Yu-Gi-Oh, such as how effect chaining works, how the damage step works, etc. So if you are looking for more advanced video tutorials like that, that will be coming in the future. So feel free to subscribe, and that'll be it. See you guys next time.